Recently, I have had a dilemma, and this is a dilemma that I think a lot of readers have in their lives, which is what book do I read next? And often I think that we think, well, what book is important? What book should we read? And a lot of the times there's people who are going to say, this is the book that you should read, this is the book that you shouldn't read, things like that. And I wanted to talk about that today a bit. And recently, I was given a bunch of free books. I received a bunch of free books, and a lot of them are more popular, famous books, like for example, Kurt Vonnegut. And if you know anything about him, he wrote Slaughterhouse-Five and a bunch of other famous, popular works that are considered great pieces of literature, and other things like that, such as Ernest Hemingway or William Faulkner or Albert Camus, and all these different authors who maybe they're great authors and maybe they are good authors, but often I think they have this reputation of being great authors and that we should read these authors because they're the great literature, or they're the ones that we should read, or the books that people say are the important ones to read. And I think often we get into this fix of what should we read, what's important, and we only really think of the books that really are deemed important, while we disregard other books such as Star Wars, for example. And we look at a book like Star Wars and we say, this is, this is just popcorn, this is trash. And we can't really get anything good out of it, or it's anything meaningful. Or something like One Piece, for example, that this is just, it's filler, it doesn't really matter. It's nothing really important. Compared to just the books that do matter. And I think that this is a very dangerous mindset to get in as a reader. And for me personally, what I've experienced recently with this is just a lack of motivation to read at all, because I think, okay, I can read, I'm able to read, I want to read, so I should read the books that are important, such as Paradise Lost. I should read this book. And then I get into this mentality of this is a book that I need to read, and rather than a book that I want to read. Well, really, deep down, I just want to read a Star Wars book. But everybody says this is good. The literary critics, the professors, everybody says this is a great book to read. But really, in my heart, I want to read just a book that's fun to read. And I think often what people say is, oh, you'll get more out of this. There's more like messages about humanity, about morality, about all these different things. Even taking, for example, this book that I read a little bit of just like the first few pages, and in it he's talking about how fiction is supposed to be moral and it's supposed to have a moral end to it, or a means of morality in it. Well, I was thinking about that, and he's saying that the books that are important to read, such as like the Odyssey or the Iliad, or these books that have some sort of moral message. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, why would it be considered that Star Wars, for example, is looked down on as not having a moral message or not having some importance to it? Well, I think that it does. I think that this has just as much moral message, just as much importance to me or you as Paradise Lost does. That doesn't take away from Paradise Lost being a good book. I haven't read it all the way through, but that doesn't take away from it being a good book. It just means that this can be equally as important to us as this. And I don't think we should look at it, at literature like that we should see it as this one isn't fine literature, this one is, this one can be talked about in a classroom, and this one can't. Such as Stephen King, oh, it's a good read, but it doesn't really matter compared to other ones that do matter, that are often the classics. Or, something like John Steinbeck, oh, he's such a great author, and I've read a few of his books, but I haven't read enough to say, oh, he's such a great author. But then I get into this mentality because of other people reading John Steinbeck and thinking, oh, he's such a great author, even though I barely read any of his books, to form that opinion. So I think it's really important to read what we enjoy to read. And I don't think we should look at reading as a chore or as like a duty that we have to do. of this is what matters, this is what doesn't. But rather, I think we should look at reading as something that is enjoyable but also impactful. Because sometimes I take just as much out of reading One Piece, for example, as I do reading a book like Paradise Lost, or reading something that is deemed important, and I get just as much out of either experience. And I think that's important because we should read what we want to read as readers, or even just as people. I think we should read the books that we think are important, or the books that are important to us, not to just look at the canon and think, oh, these are the books that are important, these aren't. And I think that often you can run into some toxic communities, especially I think on YouTube, regarding great literature, where they say, oh, like nobody cares about great literature, what's important, and it's all just trash in the literary system and whatever. Like the only literature that's being written is trash. And even in this book by John Gardner, I saw that a little bit, and actually a lot in this book, of the idea that modern literature is trash, or that there's like, even just from the first like 10 pages, this idea of shaming people or disregarding, and I could be misinterpreting this because I haven't read most of this, but this idea of shaming people or looking down on people because of their what they read, or because of what they take as important, and then they're disregarding stuff like Dante or Paradise Lost or all this stuff that is important and it's good to read. I think it's has benefits and stuff to it, but I think if you're not enjoying it, you shouldn't read it, and you shouldn't be forced to read it because people say that it's good literature, good thing to read, when you really want to be reading this. And I think it's important just to think, do I really want to read John Steinbeck, or do I really want to read Kurt Vonnegut, or am I just reading it just because people around me are saying this is the good stuff to read, this is what you should be reading? And is that the real reason why? And in a sense, I think that a lot of the times I do this, unfortunately, and falling into this habit of thinking I need to read these books. And I genuinely want to read this. I genuinely want to read John Steinbeck. But I think that it's more important just to think, what do I actually enjoy? Like, what is actually something that I'm passionate about reading? Because I've always had a passion for reading, but recently I think that I've been thinking too much about great authors or important authors, and letting that determine what I read and what I want to read, rather than looking at what do I want to actually read and reading that. And I think that's really important for all of us, to really just enjoy what we read and not read it based off that. And I think even with that, finding classics or books that people like that you could enjoy. Like, I really loved reading Beowulf recently, and I think it's important because I found something that is considered a classic and that I enjoyed. Well, I think that it's more subjective to what's important. Maybe a lot of people have been impacted by Paradise Lost, but that doesn't mean everybody needs to be, or that everybody will be. I think it's more important just to let the books that you read be the ones that you enjoy, rather than the ones that people say that you should read or say that are important. Now, before I end this video, I just want to make a challenge to every single viewer and myself, especially those of you who like reading. I want to challenge you to not read the books that everybody is saying to read. Of course, if you have an assignment, read that book. That's of course different, but I think that my challenge is just to really just read the books that you enjoy. Don't read the books, like, if you want to read Paradise, go ahead, that's awesome, that's great, but only read it if you really want to read it. If you are like, I really want to read Paradise Lost right now, and read it and enjoy it and stick with it. But if right now and at the end of the day you just want to read Stephen King, or you want to read One Piece, or even heck, if you want to read Star Wars, read it and enjoy it, stick with it, have fun with it, and don't let anybody tell you it's not important or it doesn't matter, because it is important to you. And I want to make that challenge. Read the books that are important to you. Read the ones that you enjoy reading and that you want to read, and don't read it because of just people saying that it's good or that it's quality literature. And I think even a lot of times people will say a whole entire genre or sections of books. Like I saw someone say recently, well, not recently, like a year ago, just trashing on Harry Potter, saying, "Oh, it's a horror. It's just like tropes and cliches, and there's no like good thing. It's not good at all." And honestly, if I'm gonna be completely honest, I love Beowulf, but I feel like I got more out of Harry Potter reading Harry Potter than I did of reading a lot of classics, even including Beowulf. And I think that just shows that anybody, you could take importance out of anything that you read. It doesn't have to be great literature, it doesn't have to be quality literature, even. It could be a fan fiction on Wattpad. And that's just as important and as good as reading something that is deemed as high literature. So I think that's where I'll leave you guys. Challenge yourself, and I'm going to challenge myself as well to read the books that I want to read, that I really enjoy reading, and not just base it off of people's opinions. So that's my challenge, and thank you for watching this video. I hope that you like and subscribe if this was impactful in any way. I'll be making more videos. Maybe I'll be making more videos about reading, about books, and just different stuff that I want to make videos about. Same thing with YouTube, it applies as well. Don't make the videos that people want you to make, but just what you want to make. So thank you for watching. Have a good day, and adios.